In this video, we're going to start to talk through the 5 different mechanisms of evolution, starting with our first mechanism, which is natural selection. Now, I'm going to compare the 5 different mechanisms of evolution to your hands because you have 5 fingers. So 5 mechanisms of evolution, 5 fingers on your hand. I'm going to call them the 5 fingers of evolution. So we'll start with our first finger, our thumb, which will be natural selection. So natural selection, we already talked about in a previous video, it is going to be connected to that word adaptation because natural selection is a process where organisms that are better adapted to their environment survive and reproduce more. So they have a higher fitness. And we're going to find out in natural selection, how does it lead to adaptations? Because eventually down the line, natural selection causes adaptations. Now we're going to see that there's going to be 5 steps for natural selection causing an adaptation. I like to remember the word vista to remember these 5 steps. Like I'm staring off in the distance, I'm staring off at that vista. So the first one, the V, stands for variation. Your individuals in your population, they are going to have different traits. They have genetic variation. Second one, I, for inheritance, the characteristics must be heritable. We have to pass on the genes from parents to offspring. So we need to have those genetic traits be heritable. Next, selection is going to happen. This is when organisms with characteristics that allow them to compete best will survive and reproduce more. Competition is going on in nature. We have too many organisms that the entire environment can support. So organisms are struggling to live with natural selection. And the organisms with genetic traits that allow them to compete better, they're going to be able to survive and reproduce more. Next, the T in VISTA stands for time. As we've seen in previous videos, we have to have multiple generations of time going by. So after generations, lots of time, certain traits will become more common. The ones that become more common were the ones that gave organisms an advantage to survive and reproduce and compete with each other. Whereas the traits that organisms have that didn't give them the advantage to survive and reproduce would die off and wouldn't be as common in our population. And last, the A leads to adaptation. So natural selection leads to adaptation. So this process results in populations that is better suited to some aspect of the environment. By better suited, we mean that they can survive and reproduce better. So we have that adaptation. So we have a couple of examples down at the bottom. The first one is a very famous example with the giraffes. So you can see in the giraffes, we have genetic variation. We have giraffes that have shorter necks, medium-sized necks, and longer necks, and that variation is heritable. Additionally, there's selection going on here because the giraffes are competing to eat the leaves. And we are going to have some organisms, unfortunately, lose that competition. The organism with the shortest neck is not able to reach the leaves. It's going to starve and die off. The ones with the longer necks, they're able to compete and get enough food, they can survive and reproduce. And if enough time and generations go by, that's going to lead to the adaptation of giraffes having longer necks on average, and that makes them more suited to their environment, eating leaves off of trees. Another example we can see with these mice. These mice are living on an area that is dark in color, but I have variation in my mice. I have some that are dark, some that are light. Now, in the competition, the dark mice are going to win that competition because they blend in. The bird is not going to see them. So that bird is going to pick off the light-colored mice and eat them. If they're getting eaten, they're not reproducing and passing on their genes to the next generation. If enough time goes by, we're going to see that there are going to be more of this dark-colored mice blending into our environment, surviving. That's going to be an adaptation for that particular environment. So, why are we going to compare natural selection to a thumb? Well, I would like you to think about thumbs up. If you have an adaptation in the environment, nature is giving you the thumbs up to survive and reproduce. Whereas if you don't have an adaptation in that environment, nature's voting thumbs down for you. You're going to die. You're not going to be able to reproduce and pass off your genes to the next generation. One more thing about natural selection is that this is the main mechanism for causing evolution to happen. Now let's do an example problem. This example problem says, which of the following situations may lead to natural selection? So let's remember that VISTA. We need to have variation. We need to have those traits be inherited. There needs to be selection going on where the environment is selecting things and saying that other things are dying off. We need time to be able to go by, and we're going to have an adaptation occur. VISTA. So answer choice A says the seeds of two plants land near each other and one grows larger faster. So we have variation where we have a small and a large seed. And additionally, we have competition where we're going to have the environment selecting one to survive over the other. I would say that answer choice A is an example of natural selection. So let's circle it for right now, and then let's read answer choice B. Answer choice B says that two types of fish eat the same kind of food, but one is better able to gather food than the other. So once again, we have variation here because we have two organisms that have different traits that allows one to get food better than the other. That is going to have a competition happen, and nature is going to select the one that can get food better to live and reproduce more. So I would say that answer choice B, according to VISTA, is also an example of natural selection. In answer choice C, it says, in a species of fungi, a colony spreads faster through the soil to reach nutrients than another colony of the species. Once again, this is natural selection because we have that variation. We have a struggle for existence and competition where nature is going to select one to live and the other one is probably not going to live. So because we have selected all of them, I would say our final answer choice is D. D is the correct one. All of these lead to natural selection according to VISTA.